Alright, we'll be going over the orderIT system for November the 16th, 2020. I have the orderIT system and my analysis of trades for that day open. We have had 9 trades today. 4 of them were indicated as buy, 5 were indicated as short sells. I'm going to go through each one to see possibilities. First one is CNX, Century Aluminum Company. It was tripped at 11:38 in the morning at a price of $9.14. It was a buy, and as you can see, it ended the day at $9.19. It was somewhat moving a little bit up and down, but it did end the day up above where it started, so that technically is a buy, as it ended the day above the entry point, which means it would have been a positive purchase. Check the analysis just to see what it looks like. As you can see, it was coming up in the morning, down a bit in the afternoon, early afternoon, and then went up mid to late afternoon. OBD wise, OBD is volume indicator. MACD, moving average. Again, showing morning, down a little bit in the afternoon it was showing, but it was somewhat, not moving heavily upwards in the late afternoon, but it did show again morning time that it was moving up. MACD looks like a good portion of the day is showing that it was above the baseline, indicating that it was moving upwards. Bollinger Band actually was showing somewhat a steady progression upwards, so overall it was good. So the indicators were somewhat indicating the exact same activity and somewhat a good standard activity for the day. Next trade is eBay. Obviously eBay is eBay Incorporated. It was actually down 0.25%, not down much, but it did trip a short sell at 11:40. It came in at a 48.31 and closed at 48.55, so it actually closed above. And we'll just take a quick look at the activity. So roughly around this time, around this time, and it did come down below that during the afternoon. As you can see, afternoon it was actually pretty much down below that. That technically is a buy because it was below the entry price. For a short sell, that would have been a positive trade activity. At the end of the day, it came back up. So it still is a positive trade because there still was a potential for that trade to result in a positive result. Check the analysis for it. As you can see, OBD is showing a little bit moving downwards during the day to early afternoon, and then you can see afternoon time it actually started to recover. MACD showing the same thing, that the day's recovering. DI again, showing that it was fairly, negative during the day, and again afternoon it moved up, and Bollinger Band same results, coming down, and then the day was recovering. But again, the potential was positive because in the mid-afternoon it was down below the entry point. Next trade is CCL, Carnival Corporation and PLC. It was tripped as a buy at 11:42. It did close below that, and it actually opened the day today below that, so it was actually down also again this morning. So it means that the end of day result wasn't positive for the most part. And we'll see, it was somewhat moving sideways all day long, so it jumped up. You see it actually jumped up quite a bit. It jumped up 9.5% yesterday, so morning time probably just a bit of a recovery people were getting out after they made their profit. And 11:42, so roughly around this time, and it did come up a little bit, but not extensively, and not for a very long time. It wasn't an extensive recovery. It did come up above, but not by much. I'll mark this as a possible trade because it was showing there was positive movements above it, but as you can see, for the most part, it didn't move much above the entry point. We'll take a look at the analysis for this. As you can see, OBV showing it was moving up in the morning, came down in the afternoon, and somewhat bouncing back and forth. It seemed like it was showing a bit of a positive movement at the end of the day. MACD actually, surprisingly, tripped with very, very, minor entry point indication. It did come up in the afternoon, though. DI was actually showing positive in the morning. In the afternoon it was showing negative, and in the late afternoon it was showing somewhat of recovery. And the Bollinger Bands, same thing, but it did come down in the afternoon. So that's the conclusion of it. So again, it's a possible, just because that it did show a little bit of a positive movement above the entry point, but not strong and not long. So it would have been a tricky exit if it did occur. Next trade is EA, Electronic Arts. This is indicated at 11:50:10 at a price of 18.61. It closed at 18.60. Was down 220 at 1.82%. Technically, that's a positive because it ended the day. Below its indication point. And you can see the price movement was showing somewhat a negative movement. It did stabilize at the end of the day. We'll check the analysis to see if they confirm that. Roughly till early afternoon, it was moving roughly downwards, and then in the day, it actually was making a recovery. MACD showing the same thing. Morning and early afternoon, it was actually making a recovery. DI, though, actually was showing very strong till mid-afternoon, but you can see it actually came back up and down, so bouncing back and forth a bit in DI, but it was showing a fairly much negative movement downwards. Bollinger Band, that's easy to see, it was moving downwards again till mid-afternoon, and it was making a bit of recovery, but you could have made money because it did drop below the entry point. As you can see here, it dropped below the entry point, which would have been a trade activity that would have been positive. Next trade is FSM for Fortuna Silver Mines. This is actually a buy opportunity. It was tripped at 684, closed at 684 at 11:50. So, roughly around here, 684, you can see it did come up above the 691 at that point, 691. There were multiple points in the day afterwards, even though it ended the day roughly at its entry point. It was potentially a buy activity for the day. Like I said, this is an interesting one because the stock itself was down, but it actually was tripped as it was moving upwards from its early morning activity. So this was a positive trade because it could have been exit it before the end of the day with a positive result. So let's check the analysis of this. $11.50, so it was tripped around this point, but you can see afternoon, midday, early afternoon, it was coming down again, but came back up again, which is kind of showing the second point of recovery. MACD showing the same thing, tripped in the morning, came back in the early afternoon, and so it was moving downward a good portion of the time, but it was moving upwards a good portion of the time too. DI actually was bouncing back and forth, as you can see, even though at the end of the day DI is showing that it was moving upwards and came down, but didn't drop below the baseline. So DI is actually showing it fairly consistently, and Bollinger Band is somewhat showing a sideways movement, which again, basically means it wasn't moving heavily in one direction or the other. But the end result is it would have been a positive trade because it did drop below, it did rise above the entry point. Next trade is BABA, Alibaba Group Holdings. It was tripped as a sell at 105, and you see it was down 2.5%. It did recover this morning, so it recovered almost half of what it lost yesterday, and it was indicated at 25869 and closed at 25831, so that technically is a positive result because at the end of the day showing that it was below its indication point. And it looks like it was moving somewhat, it was flatlined during the day or moving sideways during the day, afternoon, pretty much moving just sideways. So it is obviously an indication that the stock wasn't moving heavily in one direction or the other price-wise. The indicators, yeah, as you can see, early afternoon it was showing a downward trend, but for the most part, the rest of the day it was, well, OBV-wise, it was showing it was a strong positive movement upwards, so you can see it was starting to recover. MACD showing the same thing, even though it was showing positive movement OBV-wise, volume was showing that it was starting to move positive. MACD actually was showing that even though early afternoon, or late morning, early afternoon, it was showing somewhat a bit of a recovery, positive-wise, but for the most part, majority of the afternoon, it was actually moving negative. Late afternoon, it was recovering positive again. So this little bit of bump occurs to this little bump here, where the price was moving up. DI. Showing pretty much late morning till somewhat mid-afternoon, it was negative. It reverted a little bit, which is this bump in mid-afternoon, and you could see it was actually going down again in the late afternoon. And Bollinger Band is basically showing that too. It was moving downwards. It's not a heavy downwards, but it was moving downwards for the most part the whole day. And that would have been a positive trade. Next trade is FE. It was tripped at 130.22. First Energy Corporation. It was tripped as a sell, and it was indicated at 28.48 was the sell price. And you can see it came up at 28.50. So the end of the day would not have been a positive result if it was weighted. Down almost 3.5%. So it did move down. And it was tripped at 130, so roughly around this area. As you can see though, you can see that for the most part, a good portion of the afternoon it was below its indication point. It made a bit of recovery at the end of the day, which is the reason why I jumped up. That's a positive trade because there's a good portion in the afternoon that it was showing a point below or a price below the entry price, which would have been a positive result. Check the indicator. analysis. OBV actually showing that it was moving somewhat sideways, and you see end of day it moving downwards. So OBV showing that it was losing volume during the afternoon, negative wise. MACD actually was showing morning time. OBV wasn't showing it, but MACD was showing that it was moving negative morning time and then bouncing back and forth for the most part during the day, even though it was showing a positive at the end of the day MACD-wise. DI also showing a bouncing. It's bouncing back and forth. Bollinger Band not easily indicatable. So the indicators are not showing strong negative movement, but the end result is it was moving downwards. Bollinger Band actually is showing that it was moving steadily downwards. Made a little bit of recovery at the end of the day, but it did move downwards for the most part the whole day. So that technically is a positive trade. Next trade is DUK. Was tripped at 135.23 at a price of 94.72, indicated as a short sell. This trade actually was up, and 94.72, 95.01 certainly was not a point which would have been positive. So roughly around this point it was showing negative, and it came up, it recovered a bit in the afternoon, but then late afternoon, as you can see, it dropped 94.58 at this point. So at the late afternoon it was actually at a point where it could have been exited positively. So this technically is a positive trade, even though the stock itself was fairly consistent, again moving sideways. We'll take a look at the analysis. As you can see, OBV is showing that it was moving downwards for the most part the whole day. Again, this middle part here is the middle left end showing a bit of recovery. Volume-wise, moving average also showing it moving downwards in the middle day, a bit of positive. And the end of the day is actually showing a little bit of a positive response. DI, same kind of results, is actually showing it's somewhat positive, somewhat negative for most of the day. Even though at the end of the day it was making a bit of recovery, but it was pretty much negative for the most part of the day. Bollinger Band was showing a minor drop and a bit of recovery at the end of the day. So, positive because of the aspect of the end of the day, there was a drop below the indication point, which would have been a positive trade. Next trade is INO. It was tripped at 3:02 p.m. It was indicated as a buy trade at 12.81. It ended the day at 12.85, so that basically is a positive trade. And it indicated positive trade. Yes, as you can see, it was moving up in the afternoon. It basically shot up in the afternoon a bit. So that's you can see early morning it basically is losing. It did come up 14.5%, so that's a good explanation of that strong movement upwards. And as you can see, the indicating analysis is showing it was basically moving upwards. OBV showing somewhat a steady climb upwards. Middle afternoon was moving sideways, but still by the end of the day it moved upwards. MACD is showing the same thing. DI showing roughly the same thing. Excuse me. DI showing. Yeah, DI is showing that it was It was up a good portion of the day above positive, so that's good. And you can see Bollinger Band just showing that it was moving upwards, which again resulted obviously in the trade being positive. So as you can see, this was a good day. There was basically half and half. As you can see, it looks like the main charts are showing somewhat a half and half, which kind of like results into the aspect of the day being half and half. So you can see the trade activity is really overall response of the market daily activity. So the market was somewhat showing that it was half and half compared to Dow and Nasdaq positive, Dow being negative. So you say, well, half of the market indicator showing negative, half positive, so results that we got was basically half and half. But the end result for the stock itself is showing that we had 8 trades. Excuse me, we had 9 trades, 8 of them being positive, so let's just take that easily enough as 8 divided by 9, showing 88% positive. So that's a very good day with respect to trade activity. I'll leave it at that. Thank you very much.